Before you scroll past, pause for just one moment, because by the end of this story, you might find yourself wiping away tears, hitting the like button without even realizing it, and subscribing because you don't want to miss another moment like this. This is one of those stories that reminds you why you fell in love with music, hope, and second chances in the first place. The theater lights were blinding, the kind that made the world beyond the stage disappear. Backstage, a thin teenage boy stood alone, his hands trembling as he clutched a crumpled audition number. His name was Daniel Morales, 17 years old, born and raised on the south side of Chicago. To the people rushing past him, producers, assistants, other contestants, he was invisible. Just another kid with a dream too big for his circumstances. But in a few minutes, that would change forever. Daniel grew up in a neighborhood where sirens were more common than lullabies. His mother worked double shifts at a diner, coming home exhausted but always smiling for him. His father had left when Daniel was 9, and the silence he left behind was heavier than any argument. Music became Daniel's refuge. When nights were loud with shouting outside and days were heavy with worry, he sang. He sang in his room, softly at first, afraid of being heard. He sang on the bus ride to school with earbuds in, pretending he was somewhere else. And sometimes, when the apartment felt too small for all the fear and bills and broken dreams, he sang on the rooftop, letting the cold Chicago wind carry his voice. School wasn't easy. Daniel wore the same worn-out jacket every winter, and kids noticed. Teachers saw potential but also saw a boy who was tired all the time. More than once, Daniel thought about quitting school to work full-time and help his mom. The dream of singing felt selfish when rent was overdue. But his mother refused to let him give up. "Your voice is a gift," she told him one night as they shared a simple dinner. "Don't bury it just because life is hard." The idea of auditioning for America's biggest talent show felt impossible. They didn't have money for fancy vocal lessons or travel. Daniel almost didn't apply. But a local community center hosted free auditions, and his mother insisted. She took the day off work unpaid just to sit in the waiting room with him. When Daniel got the call back to sing in front of the judges, he cried in disbelief. For the first time, the dream didn't feel foolish. It felt real. Now, standing backstage, that confidence wavered. He could hear the crowd cheering for the act before him. He thought about Simon Cowell, the man known for crushing dreams with a single sentence. Daniel's stomach twisted. What if he forgot the lyrics? What if his voice cracked? What if this was the moment he embarrassed himself on national television? He closed his eyes and remembered singing on the rooftop, just him and the sky. "Sing like no one's watching," he whispered to himself. When his name was called, Daniel walked onto the stage, shoulders slightly hunched, eyes wide. The judges looked at him with polite curiosity. Simon leaned back, arms crossed. "Hi, Daniel," Simon said. "Tell us about yourself." Daniel's voice shook as he spoke. He talked about Chicago, about his mom, about singing to escape. The audience listened quietly. Simon raised an eyebrow. "And what are you going to sing for us today?" Daniel took a deep breath. "An original song," he said. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Simon looked skeptical. "All right," he said. "Whenever you're ready." The music started softly, just a simple piano track. For the first few seconds, Daniel's voice was gentle, almost fragile. Then something happened. As he sang about cold nights, empty chairs, and holding on to hope when everything tells you to quit, his voice grew stronger. It wasn't just technically good, it was raw, aching, honest. Every word sounded lived in, like he had bled onto the melody. The audience leaned forward. One of the judges covered her mouth. Simon's expression changed, almost imperceptibly at first. His arms uncrossed. He sat up straighter. Daniel hit a high note that filled the theater, rich and powerful, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. You could hear people crying. You could feel the weight of his story in every breath he took. When the song ended, there was silence, thick, heavy silence, before the theater erupted. The crowd stood, cheering, screaming his name. Daniel looked stunned, like he couldn't believe what was happening. Tears streamed down his face as he tried to bow. Simon didn't speak right away. He looked at Daniel for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. "I did not expect that," he said, his voice quieter than usual. "You're not just a singer. You're a storyteller. And that was unforgettable." Before Daniel could even process the praise, one of the judges stood up and slammed her hand down on the golden buzzer. The sound echoed through the theater like thunder. Golden confetti exploded from the ceiling, raining down on Daniel as he collapsed to his knees, sobbing. The audience screamed louder than ever. Somewhere in the crowd, his mother cried openly, hands clasped together in disbelief. Backstage later, Daniel hugged his mom so tightly it was like he was afraid she'd disappear. "We did it," he kept saying. "We did it." But it wasn't just about advancing in the competition. It was about being seen, heard, valued. In the weeks that followed, Daniel's performance went viral. Millions watched the video, sharing it with captions like, "This gave me chills," and "I cried at 2 a.m. Messages poured in from people who saw their own struggles in his story. Kids from neighborhoods like his wrote to say they finally believed their dreams mattered. His mom kept every message printed out, like proof that hope could multiply. Daniel still faced challenges. Fame didn't erase his past overnight. There were pressures, expectations, moments of doubt. But every time he stepped on stage, he remembered where he came from and why he sang. Not for applause, not for trophies, but for that scared kid on a rooftop, singing into the cold night, hoping someone, somewhere, might hear. And that's why this moment mattered. Not just because a poor Chicago boy shocked Simon Cowell, but because it reminded millions of people that talent can come from anywhere, that pain can turn into beauty, and that sometimes, one brave step forward can change everything. If this story moved you, if it made you believe a little more in dreams against the odds, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this, stories that inspire, heal, and remind us all that no matter where you start, your voice deserves to be heard. Before you even think about skipping this story, stop right here, because what you're about to hear is not just another talent show moment. It's a story about hunger, hope, heartbreak, and a voice so powerful it cracked through years of silence. By the end, you may find your eyes wet, your heart full, and your finger automatically tapping like and subscribe, because stories like this deserve to be shared. The stage lights felt hotter than Daniel Morales expected. They burned down from above, making his palms sweat and his throat tighten. Standing alone at the center of the massive theater, he looked impossibly small. A poor Chicago boy in second-hand shoes, facing four of the most powerful judges in the music industry, and millions watching from home. His chest rose and fell as he tried to steady his breathing. This was the moment his entire life had been quietly leading toward, even when he didn't know it himself. Daniel was born in a cramped apartment on the south side of Chicago, a place where dreams often learn to stay quiet. His earliest memories were not of toys or vacations, but of his mother counting money at the kitchen table late at night, lips moving silently as she tried to make numbers work that never quite did. His father used to hum old soul songs while cooking, but when Daniel was 9, that voice vanished along with him. No goodbye. No explanation. Just an empty chair and a silence that echoed louder than shouting ever could. After that, everything changed. His mother, Rosa, worked longer hours, sometimes 3 jobs at once. Daniel learned how to heat canned soup by himself and how to pretend he wasn't hungry when there wasn't enough food for both of them. At school, he was the quiet kid in the back, the one teachers worried about but didn't quite know how to reach. Other kids noticed his worn clothes and tired eyes. He became good at being invisible. Music was the one place where he didn't feel small. He discovered it accidentally, really singing along to the radio late one night while his mom slept after a double shift. When he hit a note just right, something inside him loosened. For the first time, the pressure in his chest eased. Singing felt like breathing fresh air after being underwater too long. Soon, singing became his secret. He sang softly while washing dishes, quietly while walking to school, and freely, only when he was alone. On nights when the apartment felt too heavy, Daniel climbed the fire escape to the rooftop. The city stretched out before him, endless and unforgiving, but up there, with the wind cutting across his face, he sang as loudly as he dared. His voice carried his anger, his sadness, his hope. It was the only place he felt truly heard, even if no one was listening. Life, however, had no interest in slowing down for dreams. By 15, Daniel was working part-time at a grocery store, stocking shelves after school. His grades slipped. Teachers warned him he was falling behind. One counselor suggested he focus on realistic goals. Daniel nodded politely, but inside, something broke. Maybe they were right. Maybe dreams were a luxury kids like him couldn't afford. The night he almost quit singing entirely was the same night his mother collapsed from exhaustion. It wasn't serious, but seeing her lying there, pale and fragile, terrified him. Sitting beside her hospital bed, Daniel made a silent promise to be practical. He would grow up fast. He would help. Singing could wait or disappear altogether. But Rosa, even half asleep and weak, saw the fear in his eyes. "Don't give up your voice," she whispered, squeezing his hand. "Life already takes enough from us." Those words stayed with him. When a flyer for local auditions for a national talent show appeared at the community center, Daniel laughed bitterly at first. Those shows were for rich kids with coaches and connections, not boys who borrowed bus money. He tore the flyer down, stuffed it into his pocket, and forgot about it until his mom found it while doing laundry. She didn't laugh. She didn't hesitate. She told him he was going. They argued quietly that night. Daniel listed every reason it was impossible. Rosa listened, then calmly said, "If you don't try, you'll regret it forever." So he went. The first audition room was small and unimpressive. No cameras. No cheering crowd. Just a few judges and a piano track. Daniel's hands shook, but when he opened his mouth, instinct took over. He sang like he always had, like the world might end if he didn't. When he finished, the room was silent. One judge wiped her eyes. Another nodded slowly. He walked out with a callback slip and a pounding heart. Weeks later came the real invitation. Los Angeles. Big stage. Real judges. They didn't have money for flights or hotels. Rosa borrowed, begged, and worked extra shifts. Daniel felt guilty with every step, like his dream was costing too much. On the plane, he stared out the window, wondering if this was all a mistake. Now, standing on stage, all of that rushed back to him at once. Simon Cowell's voice cut through his thoughts. "Tell us who you are." Daniel swallowed. His accent thickened when he was nervous. He talked about Chicago. About his mom. About singing on rooftops. He didn't mention hunger or fear or shame. He didn't need to. It was all there in his eyes. "And what will you sing?" Simon asked. "An original song," Daniel replied, his voice barely steady. Simon raised an eyebrow. The audience murmured. Original songs were risky. Dangerous. "All right," Simon said. "Surprise us." The first note trembled. Daniel's voice sounded small, and his heart dropped. But then he closed his eyes. He imagined the rooftop. The cold wind. The city lights. He sang about broken homes and quiet strength, about mothers who never quit, about boys who learned to be brave too early. His voice grew, filling the room, climbing higher than fear. Something shifted in the theater. The audience stilled. A judge leaned forward. Another pressed a hand to her chest. Simon's skeptical expression softened, replaced by focus. When Daniel hit the final note, it rang clear and strong, hanging in the air like a promise. Silence. Then the explosion. People stood. Cheered. Cried. Daniel's knees shook. He didn't know where to look. Tears blurred the stage lights into gold. Simon finally spoke. "That," he said slowly, "is why this show exists." And then, the golden buzzer. The sound was thunderous. Gold rained down. Daniel dropped to the floor, overwhelmed. Somewhere in the audience, Rosa screamed his name, crying harder than she ever had in her life. In that moment, years of struggle transformed into something beautiful. The video spread like wildfire. Millions watched. Millions cried. Comment sections filled with stories, people seeing themselves in Daniel. Kids from broken homes. Parents working too hard. Dreamers told to be realistic. Daniel didn't become a star overnight. He still had fears. Still doubted himself. But he walked taller. Sang louder. Believed harder. He went back to Chicago between shows and sang on the same rooftop, only this time, neighbors listened from their windows. He smiled, knowing his voice had finally found its way home. This wasn't just a golden buzzer moment. It was proof that hope can survive anywhere, even in the hardest places. That talent doesn't ask permission. And that sometimes, the quietest voices carry the strongest truths. If this story touched you, if it reminded you not to give up on what makes you feel alive, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. More stories like this are waiting, and you never know which one might change your life next.